Okay, commissioners, if you're ready, we'll call this meeting of August 4th, 2020, Sweetwater County Board of County Commissioners to order. An announcement before we do the pledge is the public will be able to comment immediately following the public hearing if there is one, and also during public comment section of the agenda by calling 307-872-3891 or by sending comments ahead of time via email to publiccomments@sweet.wi.us. With that, commissioners, there's a quorum present. Let's please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our first action this morning will be approval of the agenda. With that, commissioners, I would like to amend the agenda by adding under tab I, Mr. Dave Davis, and he will present the tax year 2020 mill levy approval that was on the agenda from the last meeting. And then add tab J, which is Gary McLean will be with us to talk about staffing seasonal position, replacing one for the fire department. So if any other commissioner has any desire to amend the agenda with anything else, with that, no more additions, I would ask that entertain a motion to approve the agenda with those two amendments.
So moved.
Got a motion by Commissioner Smith. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Lloyd. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item is the approval of the minutes from July 21st, 2020. Commissioners, your pleasure.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve the 07/21/2020 minutes as presented.
We have a motion to approve the minutes as presented from the July 21st, 2020 meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Commissioner Johnson. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. With that, our next item is the acceptance of the bills. Commissioners, your pleasure.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Smith.
I move that we approve the county vouchers and warrants, the bonds, the abates and rebates as presented.
We have a motion to approve the bills as presented. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Commissioner Johnson. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Our next order is county residents' concerns. With this time, I'll open up the floor for county residents' concern and stand for Tim to let us know if anything comes in.
There's nothing.
Nothing so far. Okay, we'll still hold for a couple minutes or a minute or so, Tim. Still nothing, Tim?
No, there's nothing.
It's like watching a pot boil. Last call, public comments. Literally, last call. Nothing, Tim? Okay, we'll close the floor for county residents' concerns. We'll move on with commissioner reports, and of course, joining us and first up, good morning, Commissioner Lloyd.
All right, well, thank you. It looks like I get a bad lead off today. So a couple things. And the first, as far as liaison work goes, I had to miss the Southwest Counseling meeting last week due to its conflicts with the fair and my kids showing sheep. But I have been in contact with Linda Akers at Southwest Counseling, talking about the potential cuts they're seeing and just having discussions with the directions they're going. So have been in a lot of contact with them, and we'll continue as they wait and see what the final numbers are and changes within those cuts under the mental health waiver or the behavioral health division's mental health waiver. The events complex didn't have a meeting last week, but I do think it's important to point out that I did spend a lot of time at the fair, and I know Commissioner Johnson was out there Friday, and I think we can all say that I think it was a fairly successful fair. Definitely the bells and whistles weren't there this year with the big show not being present because of our current situations, but there was a great focus on the kids and their projects throughout the week. And I think a lot of credit needs to be given to Marty at the 4-H extension, Liz Toman from Green River FFA, all of their committees, the horse committee, the auction committee, and all the other committees that make the fair go. And then also, the crew at the events complex, Larry, Candy, Drew, Lena, all of them, they just, Alicia, Amanda, they all just stepped up, and it was a great event. Shay, just big thanks to all of them. Really, it was a great event and turned out different than it typically would be, but was still successful for the kids. Would like to thank the buyers who were out there to support the kids. It was an interesting auction to say the least, but I feel like the kids got fair market value on their animals, and that's really the community pulling together. So congratulations to all the leadership that made the fair happen, and especially every 4-H kid that put a project together and made it happen. It was pretty exciting to see in different circumstances, but it was a successful event nonetheless. Library had a meeting, no concerns, still progressing, still open, still doing a lot of outreach type stuff with go bags and events. The library's been really prominent in some of the farmers markets, even though they can't do reading time in the library like they used to. They're doing them at the farmers markets. So great work by the library continues. And that's really it for my liaison work as an update. I do want to reach out and just remind people that we will be voting soon, and to educate yourself and be prepared to vote. And with that, I want to give a big thanks to the Rock Springs Chamber of Commerce and Sweetwater Now for conducting some election forums and putting that out through Zoom and Google and YouTube to allow people to hear the candidates. And I do appreciate their efforts in sharing that information. And then the last thing is just a side note that just kind of want to note more commission-wise, that we've had a couple meetings regarding HR Director McLean's, Gary's work that he did on the staff wage analyses, and I think maybe in the next couple of executive sessions, we take a final look and wrap that project up. Would be something I'd like to see done, and wrap up Gary's work and the efforts he's put on there and take a look at that. So if that could be something we could look at in the next couple meetings, that would be great. But outside of that, that's all I have. Unless there's any questions for me, I will pass the mic and go to the guy in the second up.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. Any questions for Commissioner Lloyd, commissioners? If you have none, I've got just a couple, Commissioner Lloyd. With the 10% cuts that came down from the state that the governor put into recognized and that type of thing through the mental health Southwest Counseling, were they notified as to what their total dollar impact would be from the state?
That's a great question. That's what Linda and I have been talking about, Doc. I was going to follow up with her this week. They knew they were getting a cut, but they haven't seen exactly what that cut looks like yet. Don't know, because remember, one of the things about Southwest Counseling, not only is do they do mental health, they do substance abuse. So they know there's cuts, but they had, the last time I talked to Linda, it was unsure of what they were, where exactly was hitting and what dollars and pots. So.
Okay, I know after this last week of talking on county commissioners and talking with Rennie McKay at the state, that type of thing, I know the governor felt through that first rounds, they got the deficit down to about 750 approximate million and that type of thing. And they were beginning to look at that second 10%, which would bring 20% everything. And it would all be based on, the cuts are based on the projections through Craig that there's going to be a third reduction of revenue coming into the state. So I was just kind of curious, because the mental health aspect is hitting communities huge due to this pandemic. And I just am concerned, because I think we're starting to see the threshold in Sweetwater County, and we don't know where it's going to lead. But thank you, Commissioner Lloyd, and thank you for the report on the fair. We really do appreciate everything that Larry and his staff are doing out there. Thank you. With that, if there's no more questions for Commissioner Lloyd, next up will be Commissioner Johnson. Good morning, sir.
Morning, Chairman. Appreciate it. And I have, first of all, the Public Works Department report. For buildings, we will be in virtual training with the Dude Solutions team most of the next week so that we can start implementing the program. This was supposed to be an in-person meeting in April 2020, but was postponed due to COVID-19. We are in the process of reviewing the final set of construction drawings for the Lagoon Road consolidated facilities. This review will take place over the next 2 weeks. Maintenance personnel have installed the COVID barriers and started working on the district court reconfiguration for their trial this next week. Engineering. S&L Industrial revised its schedule for the starting of paint striping of this paint striping project. They will start striping all the paved county roads between Rock Springs and Green River this week, and then move to the paved county roads west of Green River next week. Road and bridge. The CMAC and dust control projects are starting to wind down. The Rock Springs crew will complete their roads this week in Farson, and they will be done for the year. The Green River crew will complete Gookin Road, White Mountain Road next week. The crew will then move to Washam for a little over a week and complete that project. Parks and Rec. The Bicentennial Park Pavilion has reached a standstill due to the COVID and their parts needed being delayed. The contractor is expected to take delivery of the roof on August 21st. If the roof shows up on that day, the crews will work until finished with the project. They are trying for a Labor Day weekend opening. Crews have been working on the shooting range and archery range to try and have everything in shape for the upcoming hunting seasons. Attached to the report, you've gotten the pictures that he has sent, and they're neat pictures, and Gene does a nice job of keeping us informed with those pictures, and I appreciate that. Next, I have, as you recall, on the PSC meeting that I attended in Cheyenne from the 12th to the 14th, I've been fielding follow-up questions, phone calls, etc., to the testimony that I gave there, mostly, almost all in support of the testimony that was given by both myself and Commissioner Conley from Lincoln County. On the 23rd, we had the CLG meeting in Kimmer, and again, we had further discussions with that group relative to the PSC hearing and the Cole study information that has been put together, which was put together about a year ago. And I also echo Roy's comments about the fair, and I'd like to again compliment the staff of the events complex. They continue to do an outstanding job. And I appreciate that. And I think all the residents of Sweetwater County appreciates that. And that's all I have today. And if there are any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Question for Commissioner Johnson. Okay, with none, I guess I'm up next. And with that, I would like to report that liaison work is going along well. Most of it's via Zoom and that type of thing. So that's going well. The Farson Eden group has continued to get support from our federal legislatures for the work for construction to put a cover over that pit yet this fall. So they're run into some problems with BOR, Bureau of Reclamation. But Brassel's contingency out of Washington is working hard with the engineer from Tri-Hydro to get things rock and rolling out there, and that's coming along, and hopefully they'll be able to start construction out there to cover that pit. Also, Young at Hearts has a new interim director, Richelle Morris, replacing Ryan Rust, who took a position with the city of Rock Springs as a grant writer. I'd like to thank Ryan Rust for all his work with Young at Hearts through the years, and wish him the best of luck in his future endeavors. Also, presently as we speak, if you look to the south, you'll see a little bit of smoke in the air, and that's directly related to a fire burning in Clay Basin. Started yesterday just before noon, and it started out, fire was about 160 acres on BLM property. The source of the fire is yet to be determined, but we'll have more on that as we go on. But by 7:30 last night, that fire blew up for the most part, I guess is the right word, and over 1,600 acres had burned, burning south towards the Utah line. Within 2 miles of the fire is the Spring Creek Ranch, which is private property. So BLM, of course, having taken over the fire as it is their fire. Our crews are down there to provide support wherever they may need it. So not only is Spring Creek Ranch property was threatened last night, I didn't hear this morning where that's at, but also there's I believe a pump station down there that's part of Simplot. That's as of last night, 8:30, they were concerned because fire was within 2 miles of both of those private property as well as Simplot. So haven't had it up to date, but I do know that BLM is over it. They called for air support tankers, and because there was no private structures being threatened by fire, it was low on the priority list. So as of last night at 8 o'clock, there was no response with air support to fight that fire. But who knows where that may change. But anyhow, that's what's happening in front of us. Then also I was notified that industrial siting for Gateway South transmission towards the end of the month will start its meeting. And with that, that's another new industrial siting project. And I would like to appoint myself as lead on that project and for a co-lead. I know, Lauren, you haven't worked on anything yet for industrial siting. What's your schedule look like to participate? Do you feel, what's your thoughts?
I would love to participate. Thank you.
All right, so I'll, and then of course, I know there's more coming up, so all of us will be involved, but I'll take the lead with that. And if you'll co-lead with me, and then I appreciate that. And I'll notify Eric of that. So with that, commissioners, I conclude my report. Stand for any questions. Thank you. Moving on, Commissioner Smith. Good morning, sir.
And good morning to you, sir. Good day. We'll start with the always fun COVID updates and what's going on there as liaison to the hospital. Irene's let me know that they've done over 4,500 tests so far, swabbing tests. We call it surveillance testing at my place of business. And so yesterday I got swabbed, and it's getting to be an easier and easier process in case you cared, but I hardly even noticed yesterday. My eyes only watered a little bit. So 4,500 tests so far, and with the positives we've had and the other tests done, we're in that, hanging around that 4% positive range so far, which, you know, we can do better, but not so bad. We're also really grateful that Sheriff Gross-Nickel has allowed them to use their tactical unit out there so they can store their things, not have to walk inside and back outside, and have some Wi-Fi, air conditioning, those kind of things. So very helpful, and they're grateful for the use of that. Also, they've submitted another round of SLIB grants, and that SLIB board meeting, I think, is the 6th, if I remember right. It's coming up here pretty quick, I think this week. And they've done a great job of putting together some excellent grants and proposals for projects that would help them now through the COVID and in the future as well. So kudos to them and best of luck to them. They did great the first time around and were probably the most successful out of all the grants that I saw submitted, the most successful at getting them approved first time around. So I expect something similar here in the second round as well. And had a financial audit last week, went well. The findings will be presented in October to the board. And they say PP is a little bit tough, but they continue to work with their vendors to make sure that they get what they need. And as always, you know, wear your mask and be safe. So do what you can. I should be doing, no, we don't need to, do we? Okay, we're good. Also working on the abandoned vehicle lot. Had a meeting last week, had to think there for a minute. And really, Mr. De Leon has stepped up to help out. We've really found out what the issues were out there and how we might be able to resolve them. And so Mr. De Leon's starting us off with finding out how often we can get cars sold, having auctions, working also with the landfill to make sure that we're able to dispose of the things that we need to, that they haven't been able to in recent years. So we're on our way there. Took me a little while to get that rolling, but thank you to everyone who's helping out with that. Much appreciated. And then I was also asked to be on a selection committee for the terminal project at the airport. And we went through a number of proposals that we received, scored those, and then invited the top 3 to present to us, that committee last week, and heard from them, our presentations each, which was great. It was pretty close voting. We had some quality applicants out there, and I have not seen an announcement. I guess I should have asked Devin if it's public or not yet. So we have picked somebody. I won't say who it is, I guess, in case it hasn't been announced, but we have picked someone and are quite confident in the work that they're going to do as well. So with that, I believe that is my report, and I'll hang out here for any questions you may have.
Commissioners, any questions for Commissioner Smith? Commissioner Smith, I have a short one. How's the project coming on the hangar for BLM?
Good. It was about 2 weeks behind. And if I remember correctly, that was not necessarily their fault. I think it was supplies or product that they were trying to get in to make that happen. But then Devin mentioned that BLM said that they weren't going to use it this year anyway. So I'm not sure. Wow. But the project itself is coming along quite nicely, and should be finished up here pretty quick.
Great. We're looking forward to hearing when that's done, and looking forward to take a look at it. So thank you much. I don't have any other questions. Commissioners, any other questions? Thank you, Commissioner Smith. Oh, one other thing I'd like to say as a statement, Commissioner Smith, is you'd commented the work the hospital has been doing with COVID. You know, I'd like to just take the lead, that be a segue to, I'd like to thank the hospital, all the health services, the frontline health community for their work that they're doing with COVID, and they're at risk considerably, and so I want to thank them. But I also want to thank not only that group, but we also have our fire departments, we have our ambulances, we have everybody involved on the front line, as well as some of our very own workers at public health. So I just want to go out, accolades to them for the work they're doing, and for their sakes and their families' sakes and everybody else in the county. There's a real desire for this to come to a satisfactory ending. Thank you. Appreciate that. Up next, I believe, is Commissioner Shanefield. Morning, Lauren.
Good morning. So first I want to talk a little bit about the Broadband Task Force and the Broadband Council. We've been meeting regularly with the governor's office and with the broadband manager, with a lot of the providers throughout our communities. And we will be rolling out a considerable amount of grant funding to providers throughout the state. A few of them in Sweetwater County, which is it's going to make a huge impact across the entire state. So we're very excited. There were some providers that, almost all of the providers put in some great grant applications, really looking to improve our communities, especially our very rural communities, and ensure that we have connectivity during this time where, it's not easy to go to public places. It's not easy to send your kids to school. Often that conversation is coming up now, and trying to figure out how we can get back into schools and everything else. So I'm very excited about what the governor's office has been able to do, and the work that we've been able to come up with the task force and the Broadband Council. So more coming. I can't share any more details about that right now. But and then Christina, as you can imagine, with all of the funding that's going on, plus year end, has been very busy. She's been working with the auditors on the grants portion of the fiscal year 2020 audit report. She says the total amount of federal and state expenditures for the county component units and pass-through grants is approximately $15.2 million. She's been finalizing the FEMA PA grant for the personal protective equipment, on-call payroll for purchasing and supplies for emergency responders and the medical entities, and that is $73,872. She's preparing the third CARES Act grant application to SLIB to pay for the FEMA PA grant match and reimburse the portion of the $150,000 paid by the county and cities of Rock Springs and Green River for the Emergency Operations Center when we first got going with all of the COVID crisis. And she's preparing the Department of Health CSBG grant application for housing assistance to the community in the amount of $259,657. And that one goes through the tripartite board. She said she's also meeting with Eric this week to work on some objectives and goals for the EDA grant. She's very busy with the grant contracts and the performance reports and the follow-up, like I said, there's a lot going on. So she's doing a great job staying on top of things. We're very lucky to have her in our county. I also wanted to say thank you to Jean for taking the input that I was given on the archery range and working through some of those concerns and solving some problems. So I appreciate that. I would also like to tell the events complex, great job pulling off the fair this year. I think it's so important for our families throughout the community, supporting our youth and being able to give them what they were able to give this year. We all missed the big show as it was before, but I really appreciate everything that they did and the work that they put in to pull off what they were able to. SEDC, Kayla and Eric have been working hard. I wanted to point out that we had responded to more business leads in the first 6 months of 2020 than we did for the entire year of 2019. So I think that's telling that we're moving in the right direction. I think that Kayla's doing a great job. Eric's doing a great job supporting her. And they've got a lot of stuff going on. They're working closely with the Wyoming Business Council on an international lead potentially. COVID has put a little bit of a hold because he wants to come visit and see the property that we're talking to him about and everything else. And so I think that's very exciting. Hopefully we can get things opening back up here in the next 6 months or so and continue moving forward with that. I had the opportunity to meet with Taylor Jones and Irene from the hospital. Reviewed a lot of items around the hospital, answered a lot of my questions. I really appreciate them meeting with me and taking the time out of their day. It was a great meeting. So, and I think that is all that I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Shanefield. Commissioners, any questions for Commissioner Shanefield? With that, that'll conclude our part of our agenda for commissioner comments and reports. We're well ahead of schedule by 20 minutes, but I know Miss Lane's there. If commissioners, okay, if you will move forward, because I think most of our items are with people that are here. We can stop for a break here shortly, though, as we get to one of them. So Miss Lane, are you prepared to? There you are. You just ran from the bottom corner of my screen to the top left corner of my screen. Thank you. Are you ready? Are you ready to for the next agenda item of human services contracts?
I am. I just always have to come over to Tim so we don't have feedback in the room. So
okay,
Tim,
I'll turn it over to you then.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. So what I have here today, or good morning. How are you? How are all?
Good morning. How are you?
Good. What I have today is 3 of the contracts have come back for the human service agreements for Young at Heart for $281,337. Hospice of Sweetwater County for $71,250. Sweetwater Family Resource Center for $55,100 for a total of $407,687. Just a reminder, this is the amount of money that was given to these entities during the budget session.
Thank you, Ms. Lane. Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Lane regarding the human service contracts? Okay, if there's no questions, I believe we have a authorization for human service contracts that all the county commissioners will sign, and then we have individual contracts for each agency, which the chairman will sign. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, so with that, commissioners, let's, I'll entertain a motion for authorization for human service contracts for the amount of $407,687, broken down to Young at Heart, $281,337, Hospice of Sweetwater County, $71,250, and Sweetwater Family Resource Center, $55,100, and then authorize the chairman to sign the individual resource human service contracts.
That was long enough. Yeah, so moved.
All right, so got a motion by Commissioner Lloyd. Is there a second?
I'll second that and not repeat it.
Second by Commissioner Smith. I gotta give that one to Commissioner Smith. Okay, any further discussion, commissioners? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I hope we did that okay, John. Anyhow, moving on.
Perfect.
Is Mr. McLean available? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Yeah, I know it. Okay. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I hope we did that okay, John. Got a little recording. All right, I don't see Gary on board for the VSP, which is the Voluntary Separation Plan. I do see that Ms. Schmidt-Laura's on, as well as Christina. Are you ready, Christina, for moving forward with tab F? Or I'm sorry, not tab F, tab E, approval of resolution 20-0RGR. Nope, that's, yeah, for submission of a coronavirus relief grant application for Southwest Counseling. Christina?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm ready if you're ready.
I'm ready. Good morning and welcome, Christina. Laura, good morning and welcome.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner. So this first item, Sweetwater County has the opportunity to sponsor a coronavirus relief grant application for Southwest Counseling that will be considered for approval by the State Loan and Investment Board. So this is the CARES Act money that has been awarded directly to the state of Wyoming. There's other CARES Act grants out there, not through SLIB, that we're also going after, but this one is the famous one through the state of Wyoming. So there is no required cash match also on this funding. So as you can imagine, everyone's interested in it. However, CRG funding can only be used for necessary expenditures incurred due to this public health emergency with respect to COVID-19. I know there's been some discussion, why isn't the money being passed through? It is not discretionary money. It is very strict how the Attorney General's office is interpreting the rules. So Southwest Counseling actually would use this funding for expenses incurred because of the coronavirus pandemic and public health measures to move on-site and in-person services to online and to disinfect facilities. Laura provided me some really good information just to put in perspective the importance of what they provide. In fiscal year 20, they served 2,544 clients for mental health disorders and provided 33,631 treatment hours. For substance abuse disorders, they treated 884 clients and provided over 25,000 treatment hours. They also did 1,767 patient visits in fiscal year 20. They also have multiple offices and group homes in the area. So we have the opportunity to sponsor this grant application for a total of $139,897. It would be for telehealth equipment, My Health Point portal, and personal protective equipment for their facilities. If approved by SLIB, this funding would be awarded to Sweetwater County, then passed through to Southwest Counseling. And so with that, I would actually like to see if Laura would like to add anything for this project, since it's her project.
Good morning, Laura. Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Christina. Good morning, commissioners. So as Christina already explained, the primary goal for this funding is to reimburse a lot of expenses that we've already incurred to go completely telehealth for a period of time. Mostly our mental health services were open the entire time in person. However, our residential and substance abuse services ended up needing to go telehealth. And so we had to buy all of that equipment. We would also additionally like to plan for whatever the future may be bringing us, that we will have the ability to continue to provide those services in the future. The second part is we have spent a lot of money on the same stuff that everyone else is spending money on for sanitation, hand sanitizer, and the cleansing products and all of that. There's a little bit of furniture that we changed out because of having cloth furniture in high use, high touch areas. And so we switched that to not very luxurious plastic chairs, but they are fantastic and perfect for us. And then PPE, we did spend some money on PPE because we, like many of us, could not secure it fastly and we did not have enough on hand. So that's the third main category that we're asking for funding for this.
Thank you, Laura. Anything else to add, Christina?
Mr. Chairman, no, I have nothing else.
Okay, I would ask commissioners, any questions for Christina and or Ms. Pizzato?
I don't have any questions, Chairman. I'd just like to make a statement, if that's okay.
Would you please?
All right. I just want to thank Laura and Linda and everyone at Southwest Counseling. I've been honored to be their liaison the last 2 years, and I just appreciate all the work they do in this community. And I think people don't realize how multifaceted their agency is and how responsive they are to the needs of the people. And I just think we're fortunate to have such a solid program in our community.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. Any other questions or comments, commissioners? Laura, I have one. You talked about purchasing PPE and struggles with it. Are you eligible to get PPE through the state's presently COVID money through the business offerings that's presently being opened through the CARES Act?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is uncertain if we are eligible or not, because the current offering is for non-healthcare providers. We did not receive, we received a very, very small amount. I mean, I'm talking a few masks, a few gowns, originally through the original offering that was there. But because this current one is really for businesses, non-healthcare related businesses, we don't exactly fit into that category, but I am in touch with them. I'm working through that and trying to get some PPE through that process.
And that's through our emergency management office, isn't that correct, where the request form is?
So yes, however, I've been in communication with the state directly on that funding because we aren't a non-healthcare related business.
Yeah, and I think the applications for that, you're exactly right, is at the Homeland Security website for you. And it just brings a curiosity out also when we talk about the national stockpile PPE that is offered through public health or through the state. Were you guys on the list from for the national stockpile, which came through a priority list from public health through doctor stations?
I believe that we were on the list and that we did receive a very small amount of PPE, but that most of that PPE went to medical healthcare facilities and not to facilities such as ours. So through the governor's office, we were supposed to be receiving PPE through Homeland Security in the very beginning, and that never materialized. And then we went ahead and we purchased about $5,000 worth of PPE, and some of that got diverted at the ports.
Okay.
So we have really struggled. And one of something that I will tell you is that we run about 80 residential beds for mental health and substance abuse in the community. And we have been successful this far in keeping COVID out of those facilities. So that's been a real struggle, but we're really proud of where we're at. That doesn't mean that today or tomorrow it's going to change because it might, but we definitely have been very, very strict in how we've been running those facilities for those clients.
Very good. Well, thank you for that job well done, and I wish you the best of luck of keeping something out that many places have not been successful in doing so. And when you talk with many of the experts, they always just say it's not if, it's when. And that, so keep up the good work. Sorry for the questions at the last moment, but they'll help me as I do some visiting and see where Southwest Counseling may be with regard for qualifying for any of the PPE, whether it's through the National Stockpile or Homeland Security. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other questions for Ms. Pizzato or for Christina? With that, commissioners, I would entertain a motion to approve and authorize the chairman to sign resolution number 2020-08-GR-01 and any related documents for the submission of a coronavirus relief grant application for Southwest Counseling Service.
So moved.
Have a motion by Commissioner Shanefield to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Lloyd. Any further discussion, commissioners? No further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Laura. And thank you for joining us. Have a good day. Stay safe.
Thank you.
I see that Mr. McLean has joined us, so let's go back to tab D, which is a discussion of potential voluntary separation plan. Mr. McLean, are you out there? There you are.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Or
Kevin,
yours.
you guys are bastions of efficiency this morning, so good work.
Thank you.
I've had a number since 2010. The county has offered voluntary separation program in one form or another approximately 8 times. A couple of years we've offered it one time in the year and then later, but approximately 8 times. And the department's been approached by a number of employees, which is how this program originally was started. Obviously, employees reach a point in their career where they're eligible to retire, but due to the cost of health insurance and other reasons, they can't afford to do that. So we put this program in place. During that period, you know, we've reduced the number of county employees by around 44 positions, savings in excess of $15 million. And so I think it's been successful in that point. So one of the goals from where we're at today is I wanted to touch base with the board. I don't think we've really discussed this a great deal to see where the board's at in terms of putting this type of program out there. If the board were so inclined, I could sort of package up the thoughts and ideas and come back at a future date with more formalized program. The stuff that was included, the items that were included in the board packets are just some sample documents. We generally would have a resolution. The resolution would include policies and procedures, and then what we call the agreement and release. The policies and procedures are really the meat of the program, and that gets to what we're going to offer. Historically, we've offered cash or health insurance equivalent. So generally that's been around $30,000, either taken as cash or health insurance. Due to some concerns with how the IRS taxes the health insurance portion, we separated those for a couple of years. If they're offered together, meaning that if you take cash or the health insurance portion is taxed. If they're offered individually, then the health insurance portion is not taxed, so you get a little more value out of that. And obviously we've been at that 30,000 for some time. So, I mean, that's something we probably at a minimum want to talk about, whether that's an appropriate amount. I probably think it should be increased somewhat. But at the end of the day, I think the goal of the program was to meet the employees' needs that wished to retire and assist the county in so doing that by creating opportunities for vacancies, as opposed to having to lay people off at some point or take other involuntary actions due to financial challenges such as those that exist currently. Over the past 3 or 4 months, I've probably talked to around 19 or 20 employees. I do not expect 19 or 20 employees that would take it, but they've expressed interest at various levels. The key to the program really is the issue, which I think we have discussed somewhat, is the issue of backfilling. We have identified some positions, and I've talked with some elected officials. We have identified some positions that we know we can get by without backfilling due to restructuring and reassigning duties. Many others, it's a much more difficult decision. So I think for right now, what I'm really looking for is to see what the board's collective feeling is regarding a program of this type and at this time, and whether such it is appropriate, and if there's any particular issues that you would like addressed if we were to move forward with offering such a plan.
Thank you, Gary. Commissioners, questions? Or
Yeah, I have a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Johnson?
I've been involved with this over those 10 years that we've done this with prior commissions. The program has worked extremely well over the years. Like Gary indicates, that there's roughly $15 million have been saved during that period of time. And we have not laid off one individual during that period of time. I also agree with what Gary is saying relative to possibly increasing the amount from the 30,000. There's nothing gospel about the 30,000. The thing that we need to keep in mind, if we can, any given position where we eliminate that position, at least for 1 year, the return on that investment is, you can increase that amount and still have it, if you can keep that vacant for a year, you obviously get that savings. The other comments is a little bit of wordsmithing here. I think that one word that I think needs to be changed in the resolution is that whereas the board believes that the current economic recession will, we don't know how long this is going to last. It may last, depending on who you listen to, less than a year, or it might be 3 years. But I think that word should be may. I don't think any of us know how long that's going to be. And what we're really talking, not only personnel cost, we're talking about total employment cost to do this. The prior commissions have been strongly supportive of this. It's been extremely successful. We've downsized government, saving the taxpayers, like I indicated, and Gary indicates, roughly $15 million. And I think that's our responsibility to do that. And I think we need to continue that. So I strongly support continuing this. And I think the discussion about the amounts and how we arrive at who might be eligible is obviously open for discussion. Those are my views.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Commissioners, other commissioners' thoughts? Commissioners? I make a comment, if you don't mind, while the rest of you are thinking, is I just read that whereas the board believes the current economic recession will not significantly improve for 3 to 5 years. I think what Commissioner Johnson is suggesting is very well put, that it should read, probably should read may, not significantly. So unless there's other thoughts from other commissioners, Gary, that might be an adjustment.
Yeah, so I think, Mr. Chairman, county commissioners, I think there's two kind of important issues. We've done two separate things in offering this program. One is offering it kind of early in the year, and then offering like health insurance early and cash later, or vice versa. My feeling is right now, based upon the amount of interest and the number of people that are in positions that would otherwise be eligible, is that it may not be a bad idea to do that. But I think the real issue is where the board feels we're at budgetarily, and how significant, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of people that could take this, but if we're filling all of those vacancies, and I'm sure there's some that we would have to fill, then the budgetary benefits are reduced proportionately. And so I think that's a real important component. And as we've done this over time, and as I said, we had over 325 employees not too long ago, and by 2011. So we're much lower than that now. And some of these departments reduce staff, maybe it's one, maybe it's three. It gets to be more difficult to function at the same level of service that's expected. That starts to affect all of you from the standpoint that, you know, if a road's not bladed, if a certain function isn't carried out in the same time that it has in the past, those are things that generally come to you. And so we have to try to figure out what level of service that we're comfortable with. And then I think the second thing is obviously, you know, in terms of looking at the dollars, you know, I was looking at something more like around 40 or 42,000 in terms of a dollar amount. And then I think the other issue that really for the board to think about is offering cash now, health insurance later. Of the folks that I've talked with, there's a majority that are more interested in insurance, but there are 5 or so interested in the cash option. And so there is our ability to offer just the cash option, have it taxed, and they could, you know, still pay for insurance or take it as cash. That's also an option if there's any support to address this at this time.
Thank you, Gary. Commissioners, questions, thoughts?
Gary, the 40 or 42,000, I obviously would support that. I think the return on that would be significant, but how did you arrive at those numbers, Gary?
Well, I'll back up how we got to the 30,000 really. So the folks that are generally interested in this, in fact, the folks that originally brought this kind of general concept forward are folks that are like in the 62, 61, 63 range and looking for some health insurance to 65, which would be Medicare age. And so that dollar amount seemed to be the $30,000 amount was the amount that seemed to be appropriate to bridge that gap at that time. Obviously, we have more health insurance plans and it's gotten more expensive. And so the 42,000 is more in line with current costs of health insurance covering an individual in roughly that same period of time. Now, obviously, it depends on their individual circumstances. If you happen to have somebody who still has a family, it's not going to get as long as someone who's covering an individual, but that seems to be a ballpark amount. Also, that's roughly an amount if we offered that and it was taxed, it would be similar to the $30,000 of what they would actually receive. So it would be similar in that respect if we were to just offer the cash. So that's kind of where that came from.
Thanks, Gary. The other point I'd make relative to that is, and I made this comment to the governor when he was here, the state hasn't done this. I don't think any of the other counties have done this over the last 10 years, planning for the future. And I think Sweetwater County has been ahead of the curve. And I think that the state of Wyoming has been far, far behind the curve relative to this issue.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Other commissioners' thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, could I just make one additional point?
Sure.
So one thing I failed to mention as we have some newer commissioners in this regard is regardless of when or if we decide to do it, part of the goal with this has been to do it early enough in the year such that whatever amount was paid out as part of the incentive, we had money within the departmental budgets already budgeted to cover the costs. So obviously, if we do it later in the year, then we've got to carry that liability over into a new budget year. What we've tried to do is incentivize it such that there didn't need to be an additional appropriation. And within that fiscal year, we were in the black in this respect so that we've already saved the initial investment, and moving into future budget years, we would realize those savings. So that as we plan for future budgets, we would know that the costs in a particular department would be lower. And so we have some time to work with, but to function in that respect, we've got to do something between now and say November or so in order to realize that savings in this fiscal year and benefit the budget for fiscal year 21-22.
Thank you, Gary. Commissioners, any other questions, thoughts?
Yeah, I have a couple of possible questions for Gary and some thoughts, if it's okay with you, Chairman, Mr. Chairman. Hey, Gary, I also have been approached by a few of the employees that I've referred to you, asking if this was something we'd be looking at. You said that you've had about 19 to 20 come talk to you. I know this is an unfair question that doesn't really have the best answer, but would you give an estimate of how many people you think would potentially, what's the range that you think might be taking advantage of it this time? And I know it's a hypothetical guess, so I respect.
Sure. I think realistically, I would look at 10 or less.
And how many of those do you think we would be able to not replace, or would you think would be fall in that category of positions we may have to replace? I mean, once again, all hypothetical, just taking guesses at the situation.
Yeah, I've got three or so that I say that I know through discussions that we have commitment not to replace, or at least not to replace now. Mm-hmm. The others, there's some question about reorganization and how they would be staffed. Like, could they be restaffed a different way, or and restructured such that it might be 2 for 3, replacing 2 instead of 3, or some things like that. So, but I think there's three or so, 3 or 4 that I'm pretty confident that there's agreement on that we wouldn't replace, and others there's still some question about.
Okay.
And some that I think there's a few that I think would be strong argument to replace.
And I know we've either gone monetarily, or, and I know you mentioned this, monetarily or insurance based. Do you have a lean of which way we should go this time? I know you talked about it a little bit, but just to clarify for myself.
Yeah, I think the issue is about timing. If we felt like we needed to try to get the savings in some of these positions reduced sooner, then my recommendation would be to offer the amount that we're going to offer as cash or health insurance, even though the health insurance would be taxable at that time, meaning that you wouldn't get as much bang for your buck. But by numbers, there's a clear majority of people that are more interested in the insurance than the cash. So by that, I guess my recommendation, if we had to choose, would be to offer insurance first, and then consider possibly, depending on how much we got from that, a cash option later. But if what we're trying to do is to dial down our expenses as soon as possible, I think the best way would be to offer an amount and allow the employees to choose cash or insurance, bearing in mind that the health insurance portion would be taxable.
And I guess my last question, Gary, is, we talked about that increase to 40-42 from 30. When we started this program, we started at 30, and knowing the first time we did this was in 2010, it's been 30 the entire point, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well,
so this really,
with one exception, there was a year, it's been around that. There was a year where we did a different scheme where we used a dollar amount times years of service. So that was a variable amount.
Okay. And I think kind of thinking about it over the 10 years, it makes sense to that number because of cost insurance and also the increases in cost of, the increased cost of insurance and just basic COLA concepts would make that almost be a wash from then to now. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. And I guess the last question, Gary, is I did send you an email yesterday, and actually after I reread your stuff, you did answer already some of those questions. I know that we've opened up approximately 41, 43, 42 positions in this way. How many have we gone on to eventually backfill? Do you know the exact number, and how many are still, have we been able to really get rid of and not ever bring back?
I think we've backfilled very little of those positions. The board has approved some positions in other places, meaning we've increased employment in some areas. But in terms of backfilling positions, I could give you a hard number in that, but I think very little, very few, if any, of the actual vacancies that were created. But we have added some positions in other areas. The board has approved some positions not resulting from the early retirement, if that makes sense.
That does.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, I think that's what I have at this point in questions. So thank you, Gary, for letting me ask a lot of questions that were even hypothetical.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. Commissioners, any other questions? Okay, I see heads shaking. I just might, listening to the questions Commissioner Lloyd brought up, you were answering, Gary, about, if there were positions considered to be backfilled. I believe there's process listed out in our hiring freeze on that resolution that we would go through before any of that would be granted. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true.
Thank you.
That resolution was passed at the first last meeting.
Last week.
The previous meeting, I guess.
Yeah, whenever it was, but it was passed very recently. Other questions for the commissioners? Commissioners, what's your thoughts?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner Johnson.
when you start thinking about the alternative in the future, assuming we don't know how many years this might take, the alternative, these same positions we're talking about here could end up being layoffs. And I don't think we want to do that. And I think we need to be proactive. So, I think Roy's questions are right on. I think that we need to keep that in mind. When you look, just to prove the point, I think if you take what the total head count was 10 years ago and what it is now, it's somewhere around 44 positions. And I think Gary is talking about, there's other areas where we've may have put people back in those areas, but overall, the program's been extremely successful, and I think we need to carry on with it, especially with what we're faced with the virus.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. You're exactly right, as we haven't had to lay anybody off. And the scary part about it is with what's happening at the state level and their reactionary moves that they're presently going through versus planning for the long run, which I believe Sweetwater County has done. My worries is when they get into those second and third rounds of cuts at the state level, because they still have to make up $750 million. Realistically, when they hit that second round for some of those departments, and for sure the third rounds, we're talking people losing jobs. In fact, I'm not going to say for certain whether anybody has or hasn't in the first round at 10%, but wouldn't surprise me if I had. So since 2010, that commission had enough foresight to maybe see this coming and to help our people to maintain jobs. And that's what this has been for, is we have not had to lay anybody off. And I think so far I sense that it's everybody's goal as a commission, Board of County Commissioners, to make sure that we don't lay off anybody, any of the employees for Sweetwater County, whether it's elected or whether it's in our departments. So you're right on there. I think the question, is there any more questions, first of all, or any commissioners?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Mr. McLean.
I would just like to add that there are at least a couple, as I indicated, 2, 3, 4 positions that I think that there's been clear communication with the employee and the department head and with me regarding people that are only working because of the insurance, and that there's commitment to not fill. So even if the board, for whatever reason, isn't comfortable moving ahead with the early retirement program, I would like the board to consider at least negotiating with those employees, negotiate a quit, so that we can achieve those savings. Because to me, it's silly to continue employment where the employees don't want to work. We have another solution for the way to restructure to get those things done. The department head or elected officials committed to doing that. So at a minimum, I would say that we should move in those circumstances in some way to get that done as soon as possible and start realizing those savings because there's no cost to us in those areas. There's commitment on everybody's part. The employee brought it up. The employees have brought it to us. This is a voluntary program. And so I think at a minimum, we should move in those areas. And then obviously if the board would like to do anything else, obviously we can do that. But I think at a minimum, we should achieve those efficiencies where we can.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Commissioner Johnson.
I have a problem with that, Gary. I think we got to have equal opportunity. I think that if you start nitpicking like that and cherry picking, that there might be other employees that would say that's not quite fair. So I think the way to do it is still across the board, put forward a program with it, and that covers the people that you are talking about, but it gives everybody the same opportunity to come forward. So I think we should. There's no need to delay this, in my opinion. Let's put it in final form and bring it back to us and move on it. Because as you said, the sooner we do this, the budgeting for it is already in place.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. You couldn't have said it any better than what I was thinking. So I'm sensing, unless any commissioner out there feel reluctant to moving forward as presented by Commissioner Johnson.
I just want to note, I do agree with Commissioner Johnson. I think the consistency amongst this is essential.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. Okay, I'm not sensing nobody opposes to it. So I think with that, I believe with that thinking, Gary, let's move forward and make it happen. Is there a sense to bring it forward, commissioners, with increased dollars, both with health insurance or cash?
I think, Mr. Chairman, that I'd go with Gary's recommendation on that. Leave it up to the employee, either one, and I think the $42,000 is a good number to go with.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Commissioners, your thoughts? Anybody?
I agree as well, Mr.
Heartburn,
Chairman.
huh? No heartburn, huh?
No,
Okay.
I agree as well, Mr. Chairman. I think that increasing the dollar amount is realistic, especially since it hasn't changed in 10 years and times certainly have. So I believe that's a good figure to go for. And it's a great program. It really is. It's proactive. It's allowing people to make choices instead of forcing managers and elected officials to make choices about who should stay and who shouldn't. And yeah, the foresight of that commission back in the day is excellent. And I'm glad that this has continued on.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith. Any other thoughts, commissioners? Okay, Gary, I think.
I just have one question, Commissioner Chairman Wendling. One number that would be, I do support this and I do believe we should move on, but one number that I think would be interesting is to see if we could get actual payroll numbers from like 2010 to 2020 without the insurance and benefit packages and just the insurance, just what the payroll was. I think that would really show how effective this program has been a long way. And I think it would be a good number to continue to do if we continue to move forward with this program, because then you have some of that factual data to say, this is where our payrolls have gone during this period of time because of these pieces. And I also go just back, I'd rather go down this route than the layoff route. And it also benefits long-term employees. And I think if we're gonna benefit anyone, I think we should benefit some of those long-term employees with this option. So, but I think that going back to it, I think that payroll information over and pulling out and just making straight payroll, not any of the benefit additions or anything, because I think then that's skewed because that changes so frequently and it's increased so much the last couple of years. But I think that'd be a real telltale number to show as a baseline of information as we move forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, could I speak to what Roy's asking there?
Sure, Commissioner Johnson.
Roy, the only problem with that, and surely we can put it together, is over those 10 periods, that period of time, there have been salary and wage increases and for the existing employees. So there's some bias that you might have to ferret out in order to have apples to apples comparison. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but just be aware that those numbers aren't pure apples to apples.
Mr. Chairman, County Commissioners and Commissioner Lloyd. I had provided a summary, and it's been, probably, back in November. So that went through, I itemized for the board where the staff reductions came from, which departments, when they were vacant, and how long they've been vacant, that totaled up to the 15 some million. So I'm going to resend that out to everyone, and then take a look at that. If that's not, doesn't meet your needs, please let me know. I'd be happy to get another report. But from the start of the program, we show one vacancy, this department, two, this department, and how long those positions were vacant, and what the salaries were. Now, bear in mind that the salaries, had they stayed, would have increased over that period. So the number, the 15 million, is a very, very conservative number, because we don't project, future salary increases in that regard. We just show the savings over time at the salary when they left. But I will send you that itemization, and you can also see for yourself where, if any of those have been replaced. So I will resend that document again, just as part of the discussion, because I think that is very specific, where the departments where the vacancies came from, and how long they were vacant, and what savings resulted from that vacancy.
Thank you, Gary. That'd be great. Commissioner Smith.
Gary, is that the same document that you got at the end of the things that's in our packets? Is that the same document?
It is, yeah. I think
Okay.
I included it also, but I can resend it specifically. I mean, while we're talking about that.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, commissioners? Mr. McLean, do you have enough information to move forward?
Yes, I'll put together some documents for board consideration at the next meeting.
That would be wonderful. And then you weren't on earlier. I might throw this in. Well, any other thing during separation program the commissioners like to say? Then I'll have a comment, Gary, as soon as we're done with this. Very good. The other thing, Gary, you weren't on during commissioner reports, I don't believe. And Commissioner Lloyd brought up meeting again to look at information and finalize the salary schedule here in the near future during executive session. Just wanted to share that with you. So maybe the next meeting or the following. Thank you. Very good. We appreciate that. With that, Mr. McLean, we thank you and look forward to seeing those documents. Commissioners, if you want to, we could take a break or do one more item with Ms. Marshall and then take a break. What's your desire? One more?
Let's do one more.
All right. Let's go to tab F, which is approval to submit a fiscal year 2021 congestion mitigation air quality grant application. And here to present that is Ms. Marshall, along with our Public Works Director, Mr. Legursky. Good morning, Gene.
Morning.
Glad to see you here today. Floor is yours, Christina.
Great. Well, good morning again, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. The Public Works Department is requesting permission to submit a fiscal year 2021 congestion mitigation air quality grant application to the Wyoming Department of Transportation. This is so that they can apply magnesium chloride dust suppressant to many various county roads. As you may recall, the purpose of CMAQ federal funding is to alleviate air quality issues created by energy development and other industrial activity in the vicinity. So this grant requires a 20% cash match. And under this grant application, the work would have to be done by December 31st, 2021. So the total budget of this proposal is $437,394.73. Gene had identified approximately 107 miles of roads to apply this magnesium chloride. I provided in your packet a map of the roads. So this match for this project of $87,478.95 was actually included in the fiscal year 2021 budget. You know, sometimes when we talk about carryover, what happens is a lot of our capital projects go over 2 fiscal years. So sometimes that match is not fully expended by the end of June. I also provided in your packet just an idea of how much CMAQ grant funding we've been provided in the last 4 years. That's just for your information. And with that, maybe Gene would like to talk about his project.
Okay. Mr. Legursky, floor is yours.
Really don't have anything to say on it. It's a typical project we've been doing. We have to do this project. You know, it's either dust control that we pay for ourselves, or we go through the CMAQ money and have them pay at least 80% of it. We do about $450,000 worth of magnesium chloride application on about 155 miles of road a year. And we've done that for a number of years. It works very well in saving our roads, making them last longer, making them less maintainable or more maintainable. We don't have to be on them as much to maintain them, I guess is the way to put it.
Very good. Thank you, Gene. Christina and Gene, are you ready for questions?
Sure.
All right, commissioners, questions regarding the project or the grant? Okay, with that, if there's no questions, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve and authorize the chairman to sign resolution 20-08-GR-02 and related certifications for submission of a fiscal year 2021 CMAQ grant application.
So move.
Got a motion by Commissioner Johnson. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Shanefield. Any further discussion? No further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Mr. Legursky. And
Thank
at
you.
this time, I would like to, our next agenda item is scheduled for 10:10, which is 20 minutes away. Let's take a 15-minute break. Be back here at 10:05. And we'll start there with tab G with Mr. Slaughter and Ms. Berry for reserves and investment policy. Thank you. One break. Okay, we're back live, Tim. Okay, I see. There we go. We got to wait for, I think, Miss Lane. There she is. Thank you. I'd like to call this meeting back to order. And as we move forward on our agenda, which is tab G, which is reserves and investment policy discussion, I'd like to welcome to the commissioners meeting, Ms. Bonnie Berry and Mr. Rob Slaughter. Rob, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, commissioners. You know, I'm not real sure where we're supposed to be going with this. I watched the meeting that you had the last meeting, and during that meeting, the chairman suggested that for this meeting, you have myself and Bonnie talk a little bit about our reserves. I have not had any contact with anyone since that point in time, so I'm not sure exactly what we're to be looking at here. So I think, let me just preface this with kind of where I think this started, and then we can go from there. Several months ago, as part of the budgeting process, I thought that it would be beneficial to myself, along with the commissioners, to have a discussion talking about where our reserve levels need to be, where this commission feels like those reserves should be held. I felt like it was probably important that because we were seeing all of the changes in the investment climate and we're seeing a lot of our investments being called, that we look at our investment policy and then have discussion with respect to those principles which govern all of our investments. So I think that's kind of where this precipitated. I think that the bulk of that probably lends itself more to a workshop type format rather than doing this in a commission meeting. But I'm certainly, I think I'm prepared and I can discuss pretty much anything you would like to with respect to the reserves at this point in time. And then once we're done talking about the cash reserves, I would like to talk to you a little bit about our investment policy and where I think we need to go with that and kind of make some suggestions there. So that's kind of what I see, Mr. Chairman. As I say, you had referenced at the meeting last Tuesday that you wanted us to talk. I would be glad to answer any specific questions that I can with respect to our reserves and where we think they should be or things of that nature.
Yeah, and thank you, Commissioner, or I'm sorry, thank you, Rob, our treasurer. You're exactly right. That was conversation, and there was a desire that when we looked, I think you presented this policy a while back and to us and that type of thing. As I read through it, it's supposed to be annually presented and looked at by the commission, and that guides us or guides you, because you're responsible for it, to invest the dollars of the county and that type of thing. But also, in order for you to do those investments prudently and wisely, you need to know how much it is that where's the threshold and that type of thing. So they go hand in hand, and that type of thing. So and then it becomes, I believe, the board's responsibility is first of all to, after annual review of the policy, prove it and then turn around and I believe, which has not been in a formal fashion, but review, you know, what our reserves are at and exactly set that threshold of, you know, for this commission and possibly the future commission is yearly is determined how where's that threshold going to be for reserves and to hold ourselves so we outside of probably emergencies go below that, and what are those considerations and that type of thing to help set that. So yeah, it may take more conversations than this and that type of thing, but I think it's important that we start out to understand, we know what reserves are, they're dollars, but exactly what are their importance and that type of thing. I think those are questions that maybe some commissioners may have or may not, but I think sometimes I personally wish that this conversation started a while back and not in the middle of a pandemic, not in the middle of where the state's looking at 30% cuts and have no idea where the support's going to come for new revenue. But I do know realistically, whether we like it or not, there are certain things that the state is going to walk away from, and it's going to be laid on the shoulders of counties and county commissioners to at least be expected to look at backfilling them. Whether they do it or not, it's up to them. So, but I think it's important we, knowledge is the best defense or the best offense, however you want to look at it. So anyhow, that's exactly where it's at. So I don't know. I know Miss Berry's on as well. Bonnie, do you have anything to comment that besides what Rob had to say?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Commissioner Johnson.
Before we get on to Bonnie, I just have one general question of Rob. The policy, the Sweetwater County investment policy that's in our packet, Rob, is that the current policy? And if so, when was that last approved?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Johnson, yes, that is the statement of investment policy, which we have on file. It has been in place for probably 15 years, I would guess. The statute actually states that it shall be reviewed annually. We have not done that. We've done a poor job of reviewing that. If you'll remember, you were on the commission the last time we did a workshop on this, and this was one of the things that I brought up at that point in time. In crafting this policy, it's something that I think each of the commissioners should have a fundamental understanding of what our policy is. And that's the reason that it should be done. So one of the suggestions here is, and I'll talk about this later with respect to the policy, that when we do the application for deposit of public funds, I think that would be the appropriate time to make sure that we approve this each year. So really, I kind of saw this as being two separate discussions, the first one being about reserves and then the investment policy. So if we could go back and just discuss the reserves first and then get into the investment policy, I think it'll flow a little bit better. But I think we can tie all of that together then, if that will suffice.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Rob. And I think you're right on. We always approve that investment where you put the funds. So that would be a great time to do that. And if the prior commissions were negligent in approving this, I think that was John Colb's problem. I think it's his fault.
I'll second that.
Thanks for bailing us out, Wally. Anyhow, go ahead. Bonnie, I know you're board and you do our budget and you do our audit and that type of thing. Direction that Rob's wishing to go with it seems like to be the right direction. But before we get going, talking about reserves, is there anything you wish to add at this moment? Or
yeah, I just wanted to make it clear to the commission and everyone watching our kind of what our reserves are. So we started the year this year with 42 million, almost 43 million in reserves. But that included the cash carryover that we had last year, which was roughly $5 million. We budgeted to spend all of that cash carryover in fiscal year 2021. In addition to the cash carryover, we also budgeted to spend an additional roughly 3.9 million out of reserves. So right now, if everything goes according to what we budgeted, our reserves at the end of this fiscal year will be about $34 million. So that's where we'll be sitting at the end of the year, assuming everything is spent and everything comes in that we budgeted for, 34 million.
Okay.
I wanted to point out that reserves also includes our cash flow money. So we can't go, just because we'll have $34 million at the end of the year, that doesn't mean we can spend $34 million out of reserves next year, because we have to have money for cash flow. At the end of the year, our reserves are usually the highest they're going to be, because it's right after we've received the 3-point-something million in PILT. It is shortly after we've received the big revenues in May. So it only goes down from there. So the lowest it goes is right before our November revenue and right before our May revenue. I looked at last year to see the difference from the highest to the lowest point, and we actually went down about $8.7 million. So we need to have at least $8.7 million just to pay the bills and to pay payroll in reserves. So we cannot go below that. Otherwise, we won't be able to, we'll be holding vouchers, so we have enough money to pay them. We won't be able to pay payroll. So it's essential that we keep at least that amount in there. And I would recommend higher than that, especially if we continue to spend money out of reserves that does not include the cash carryover. I've done the budget for 9 years now, and this year was the first year that we've ever spent money out of reserves that was not the cash carryover, that was not for a specific purpose. In the past 9 years, we've taken money out of reserves for the Justice Center and for the HHS building. And those are the only two things that we've taken money out of reserves for that was not the cash carryover. So this year was different. We took about 3.9 million out just for operations. So that being said, I think that the reserve level needs to be a little bit higher than that. But I think the purpose of the discussion today was just kind of get an idea of what the commission feels the reserve level should be, as Rob had said. I think Rob's number's a little higher than mine, but if we're going to continue to spend money out of reserves for operations, I do believe that number should be higher. So that's what I have to say. I just wanted the commission to understand what the reserves are. Just because we're going to have $34 million in reserves next year, that doesn't mean we have $34 million that we can spend. That's just extra money. And I just wanted to make that clear. Are there any questions about that?
Commissioners, any questions for Bonnie?
Mr. Chairman, I have one.
Commissioner.
Bonnie, when you say the 34 million at the end of the year, you're talking about the end of 2020. How does cash carryover assume that? Does that, how is it assumed in that? Is that everything that is budgeted this year is spent? Is that how you get to the 34 million?
Yeah, so cash carryover is going to add to that reserve number. So assuming we have another $5 million in cash carryover at the end of the year, and say our revenues are right on, then we'll have an extra $5 million in reserves. But then if the commission decides to spend that to supplement the revenues with that cash carryover, then that will go away. It'll be part of the budget. So cash carryover goes into reserves, but then it's spent if the commission decides to use that to supplement the revenues for the budget, which I assume we will need to do next year with the revenues projecting to go down. And I know Rob had prepared some information for you about the next couple years. I don't know if Rob, would you like to present that information now?
Yeah, Bonnie, that was an excellent segue into what I wanted to talk about. And so I think that very well covered what we're trying to accomplish. So I think that the concept of reserves is an extremely philosophical term. And I think each commissioner and every person who deals with it probably looks at things a little bit different. So my goal is to make sure that we have everyone on the same page and understanding where we are. Now, when Bonnie presented the numbers to you, she and I had talked last week And the number that she and I had come to at that point in time for our reserves was 33.5 million rather than 34. So realize that the numbers that I'm going to present to you today are reflecting $33.5 million rather than 34 as the balance that our reserves will be once all of the revenues and all of the expenditures have worked themselves out for fiscal year 21. So that will be effective June 30th of 2021 is what that reserve amount will be for. So, you know, we've talked about this for years and years and years, and there's never been a true consensus of what that number should be for us to target our reserves at. My personal philosophy has always been, I think that our reserves are much better in the pockets of the taxpayers rather than in the pockets of government. So we need to have enough money on hand to handle any unforeseen circumstances that come up. And we also have used that reserve to fund an extremely large part of our revenues each year. We've been earning on an average year, probably in the neighborhood of $700,000 or $800,000 in investment income on that. So it's been a big part. So the two things that we generally would keep the reserves in place for would be to fund those unexpected financial needs and to fund additional revenue for your budget. So with the philosophy being the money's better in the taxpayers' hands, you know, I believe that we probably have had our cash reserves at a level which is probably higher than I would think that it should be. And that's kind of been the discussion Bonnie and I have had several times, had it with several previous commissioners also. And so we've always tried to come up with, you know, what is the perfect number to keep for our reserves? And so, you know, my philosophy has kind of always been, you know, the $30 million threshold is kind of the number. In talking with Bonnie, you know, as she has said, she believes that, you know, really, as long as we have enough money to fund the carryover and the needs that we have for our expenditures from July 1 through November of each year, which is the 9 million she referenced, that we probably, if we were going to balance our budget each year on revenues versus expenditures, could get by with slightly more than that. But what we're seeing is not that. So what we're seeing, if you look at fiscal year 21's budget, for example, we had $38 million as budgeted revenue. We had $47 million as budgeted expenses. And so that's where we came up with the $8.9 million that Bonnie referenced in total that was used to balance that budget. Now, the way she references it is with $5 million roughly of carryover, $3.9 million of reserves. Technically, in my mind, as of July 1st, when we start a new fiscal year, that carryover becomes reserves and they're one and the same. So there can be a lot of confusion with that. The fact of the matter is it's all one pot of money. So that was what we did for fiscal year 21. For fiscal year 22, okay, just to give you an indication of where I think our reserves are going to be headed. In fiscal year 22, I talked with the assessor's office over the last few days, and they're still anticipating that we're going to see a $400 million decrease in valuation. Okay, a $400 million decrease in valuation equates to $4.8 million. I've rounded that to $5 million. So basically $5 million less in revenue. If we were to assume that everything else was equal, okay, our expenditures remained the same, our carryover was still $5 million, which is what it was this year, and we funded the budget at the same level for fiscal 22 that we did for 21, what we would have at the end of fiscal year 22 as cash reserves would be $24,700,000. Okay, now that's once again based on the fact we're looking at a tremendous decrease in valuation, and that's going to affect the revenue side of this. And we're either going to have to cut those expenditures by that amount, or we're going to have to fund it. We have to have a baseline, and that's the reason I've chosen to use this. This is a baseline for us so that we can compare apples to apples on it. So then moving forward into the next fiscal year, which certainly my crystal ball is not clear by any means, but based on the best information we have at this point in time, one of the things that we are anticipating for that next fiscal year is we're going to see Trona start to improve a little bit. What we've heard from the Trona industry is that they're going to be down, they believe, for 6 to 8 quarters potentially. So if we look at the same thing, once again, everything else being equal, but $100 million increase. So Trona coming back basically 1/2 of what the assessor's office is projecting it's going to decrease in fiscal 22. We would need $3.8 million of additional reserves to fund the fiscal 23 budget. So we would be looking then at that point in time in funding that same $5 million in carryover, which we projected, $3.8 million to fund the decrease from fiscal 21 levels for 23 and the $3.8 million that we funded in 21. So if we handled everything exactly the same way as the budget was done this year, we kept all of the entities whole as to where they were right now, that would leave us with $17,100,000 as reserves at that point in time. Now, I'm certainly not insinuating that that's going to be the case, because I would believe the commission, you know, the voluntary separation agreement that you talked about earlier today is certainly something that will cut some of those expenditures out. I'm sure there will be lots of other areas that you'll be looking at cutting, but I think it's going to be imperative that you have to cut. But if we were going to fund at the same levels that we did this year, this will give you some idea, some indication of where I think those reserves would be going at this point in time. So that's kind of where, you know, the reserves will be. So once again, back to the philosophy between where do we want to keep those reserves. If the number that we choose to fund our reserves at is $15 million, okay, we're probably well on track to do that at that point in time over these next couple of years. If it's $20 million, then we're probably a little bit behind. Now, as Bonnie said, certainly we're in an economic time right now where it's out of the ordinary. In the past, we've typically funded the budgets with a portion of the carryover, or we funded it directly with revenue. But what we're looking at right now certainly is somewhat unprecedented. We've seen it a couple different times in the last 30 years where we've seen tremendous decreases in revenue, and it's really affected things. But we're in that situation right now, and I would anticipate that the board is going to have to once again supplement the budget to maintain fundamental levels, maybe not at the same level they're at right now, but to maintain fundamental levels, they're going to have to supplement with reserves more than what's been done in the last several years. So for that reason, I think it's wise for us to keep the reserve levels up at a little higher level than allowing them to get down, as Bonnie would say, maybe to $15 million or something like that, accounting for the fact that we would need that $9 million to operate and then have roughly $6 million for contingencies or things of that nature. So that's kind of where I'm at with respect to the reserves and where I think we're headed at this point in time. And I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Rob. Commissioners, Commissioner Smith.
Rob, help me out here. I'm a little slow and not doubting your numbers at all. So just looking for further explanation. So just say this upcoming fiscal year, you say when we fund the budget as we did this year, and we've got the carryover, but that carryover, doesn't that $5 million roughly come off of it goes back into reserves, and so doesn't that take the $5 million off of the reserve? I mean, off of the total that you're talking about of what we're going to need to fund?
Commissioner Smith, no. Okay, so let me explain why. Okay, yeah. In the fiscal 21 budget, we took that full $5 million, okay, and we funded that carryover and added $3.8 million to that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so assuming for fiscal 22 we were going to have $5 million again, okay, and we were going to fund at the same level, okay, we would need to fund with another $3.8 million at that point in time from reserves, but we're going to be looking at a $5 million decrease in revenue in addition to that. So we have to come up with an additional $5 million in addition to that carryover to get us to that same level.
Okay, good, thank you.
Did that clear that up?
Yeah, that makes more sense. Thanks.
Thank you. Other questions, commissioners? Bonnie?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, I saw your screen light up, so I thought maybe you had, so I'm trying to watch everybody so we don't miss anybody. So, other questions? Pretty good understanding of the reserves?
Mr. Chairman, one other thing that I did do, and I don't think this is probably the appropriate time for it, but in your meeting 2 weeks ago, Mr. Legursky had talked about the drawdown for the potential Lagoon Drive facilities and the fact that it would potentially be spread over 3 fiscal years at this point in time. So I did run numbers on that, and I have that available for you. So between now and the time that you look at funding those facilities, you know, it may be something as part of a workshop that you'd like to look at some of that information also. But as I say, I've got several other things that I'm not real sure are appropriate for the meeting today that I think you would like to see, but I think a workshop format would be a better way to do that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner Johnson.
I agree with what Rob just said, because we don't even know what those numbers are yet. So you can't really rely on the drawdown. We need to know, we've made no decision how much of that facility we're going to build, et cetera. So you have to know that before those numbers mean anything to us. So I agree with Rob. I think you put that discussion off until such time as we have all the information we can gather to know what those drawdowns are going to be.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, in addition to that, you know, one of the things that will help with respect to this, in talking with Dave yesterday in the assessor's office, he thinks that he'll have updated numbers in the first week in September, or roughly that first week in September from the state. So, you know, the numbers that we gave you today are the best numbers we've got right now. Those numbers are going to change in September. We're going to have the second quarter data in actuality rather than forecasted. So, you know, waiting for that time to put some of this together is going to make a lot of sense, and it's going to give you a lot better information that way.
Thank you, Rob. Commissioners, any other comments?
Just a couple thoughts. I do appreciate the numbers, and I had a chance to kind of talk to Bonnie quickly multiple times this morning and multiple times over the last couple of weeks about budget and projections, and also Rob. And I think Rob gave a fairly good sketch, the best he can, you know, knowing that. And there's so many other factors I think we have to look at with the decrease in state funding that could affect. There's no doubt in my mind some of our outside entities are going to see significant cuts from the state level. And so there's a chance we're going to see increased requests from them. And so those are things we're going to have to look at. You know, the Trona industry, you know, they're predicting 6 to 8 quarters, but we're not sure. You know, there's so many factors out there to make it interesting. And I think one of the things that, knowing Bonnie and Rob both had different numbers, I almost look at it that they're both right. And I think that the reason is because I think, and when we're in good economic times, we could probably see our reserves go down lower, knowing that it will bounce back fairly quickly. But during tougher economic times, we probably may want to consider that reserves higher based upon the fact that they aren't good and we may have to draw from them. And I think the other thing too is we prepare for the budget as we even go into next year and we start having those discussions. What is the philosophy of our commission? Are we going to be willing to go back into reserves? Are we just going to work with cash carryover? Because if we're going to continue to, I think, going into reserves to cover our budget, then that number has to be higher too. So it's just interesting conversation and stuff to think about because there's so many extenuating factors to play into this.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. Any other comments, commissioners? I fully agree that, this is a good place to start, Rob, and I think you and Bonnie both have set that wheel in motion. And I do think we need to continue to carry on the conversation, and a workshop may be the right venue. But at least with what we've done today, with the thought of reserves, and then also knowing that we're going to review that policy when we establish, sometime after this or prior to establishing our bank accounts for investments and that type of thing. I think gives us some time to think about and better prepared, some information to start with so that we can work into a better workshop. But it's important enough to get this started. It's important enough for all of us to get on the same page with you and Bonnie as to what your thoughts are, but yet I agree it's a little early to make a decision for sure exactly where that threshold's at. And I think we can probably get there with more information as we move forward. Does any commissioner disagree with the thinking of holding, continuing the conversation?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner Shanefield.
I think that this is a very important discussion for us to continue to have. And I just want to say thank you to Rob and Bonnie for presenting the information and knowing that we have a lot to work through and a lot to talk about. And I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Shanefield. Then I'll go ahead and schedule I'll talk with you, Rob and Bonnie, and talk about when we want to set up a workshop. I did ask if, I see Dave Davis is here, and Dave, you might have something to say about evaluations, because that was brought up by Rob.
Yeah, Rob had said that we would have the information mid-September, which is correct. We usually get the hard mineral information the first week of September, and then the oil and gas the following week. Now, looking at the calendar, your first meeting will be on September 1st, and then your second meeting will be on September 15th. We can schedule it. I wouldn't schedule it for the first meeting in September, but we might have a portion of that data by that meeting, the second week of September, or I'm sorry, September 15th. Well, if you want to put it on the agenda for that time, that would be the soonest it would be available. But if you wanted to wait until the first meeting in October, I'm sure I would have the data by then.
Okay. All righty. But yeah, and rather than put it on the agenda, we'll do a workshop for this. Okay. All right. We'll talk more about it, and then I'll schedule it for one of the next meetings late in September, first part of October. Okay. All right. Anything else, commissioners? No. Thank you very much, Rob and Bonnie and Dave. Very important, good information, and look forward to moving forward and helping establish this for the county.
Mr. Chairman, if I could go back to the second half of the meeting to talk about the investment policy just a little bit.
Sure.
If that's all right.
Yeah, so okay.
The second idea, or the second thing that I wanted to talk about today, was the actual investment policy which we've been operating under. And as I stated, it was about, and I'm going to say 15 to 20 years ago, the legislature required all counties to develop an investment policy. And at the time that was done, Sweetwater County's investment policy was very simple. It was, the commission at that point in time felt like it was something that was a very minor factor. And so the initial investment policy that we had was that I, as treasurer, could invest in anything in Wyoming Statute 94831, which was overly broad. And at the time, I didn't realize that it really subjected me to potential liability with respect to that, I think. So after having that policy in place for a couple of years, I went out and through information from the Government Finance Officers Association in conjunction with a couple other finance professionals and with our county attorney's office, developed this investment policy that you have copies of right now. So there have been very minor changes in it over that. I would say it's been in effect, as I said earlier today, for about 15 years. There are some technical things that need to be changed. There are some things that the commissioners may want to address with respect to this. So I would first ask if there are any questions on the investment policy. And then secondly, what I would like to do, if it fits into your parameters for this, would be to make the changes that I perceive need to be done with this, and then bring it back to you for your approval at one of the meetings in September. So, and certainly if there are questions or comments on this, I would add those, or you can email me if there are other things rather than doing it today if there are things. But if there are specific questions today, I would be glad to answer them on that. But Mr. Chairman, if you feel like that would be appropriate, I'll make those changes. I'll take it past John DeLeon. He's already reviewed this and gone through and made a few of the changes with me. I will have him review that and then bring it to you for final approval at one of the meetings, at one of your meetings in September, if that's okay.
Thank you, Rob. I would probably say all of the above, and we'll start out first as having the commissioners receive this in their packet and had a chance to look at it. Do they have anything they'd like to add and or have questions about presently? But as they read it, I would also say if they see something they have a question about, they email it to you as well. And then once you get it all put together along with your thoughts, have John look at it and then present it to us with what changes were made at a future meeting. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
All right, so we'll start out first of all as commissioners, any looking at the policy that was put in our packet, the financial investment policy. Any thoughts or questions on it? You know, I know Wally had some earlier. Commissioner Johnson.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make sure that I knew where this document came from and how long it's been in place, because as I look at it, I don't see anything wrong with it. But I think Rob, he's got some ideas that I surely would be willing to look at. But I think the primary thing is to make sure that the county attorney, deputy county attorneys looked at this and make sure it complies to what current law is, because I think there have been changes on relative to investment policy in the state of Wyoming. And I think that came from Governor Gordon previously. And I think that needs to be incorporated. So anything that's brought back to us, I think should be highlighted, what those changes are specifically with state law, and then and a different highlighting from what the changes that are being recommended by the county treasurer. So that's my ask relative to this, because I think it's an important document. The responsibility for those, while they might rest with the treasurer, where the rubber meets the highways with the county commission, and we need to make sure we agree with what's being done.
Very well said. Very well said, Commissioner Johnson. Thoughts, other commissioners, anything regarding the policy? Not seeing anything. John, do you need to say anything right now? Or are you okay with what you're hearing so far?
No, I'm okay with everything that's been said. You know, just to address Commissioner Johnson's concerns there, I don't think that there have been any statutory changes that I'm aware of, other than just some of the language that's used to just the name of the policy. So I don't see, and I'll double check with Rob in terms of the timeframes that it needs to be looked at yearly. And so I will check with Rob on how often that has to be looked at by you as commissioners. So I understand the directives, and we'll try to communicate that as well to the commission.
Okay. Thank you, John. Rob, are you okay with it so far?
Absolutely.
All right, so we'll look forward to that. I'll just say drafted, updated copy with notifications of changes as Commissioner Johnson requested. And then we'll, when you're ready, we'll put it on as an agenda item at a future date, okay?
Will do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Slaughter, and thank you, Bonnie, and thank you, John. Any other comments, commissioners? Okay, thank you very much. And I do want to make note that we're back on schedule, pretty close to our agenda. That brings us to tab H, which is approval to submit a USDA community facility direct loan and grant program pre-application for the Sweetwater County Consolidated Facility Lagoon Road project. So with that, joining us is Ms. Marshall and Mr. Legursky. Welcome again. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, Sweetwater County has the opportunity to apply for funding from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, or USDA. They have a Rural Development Community Facilities Direct Loan and grant program. I believe Jean mentioned this to you all at the last meeting. So the purpose of USDA funding is to provide affordable options to develop essential facilities in rural areas, such as the Lagoon Road project. Just to give you an idea, I asked USDA examples of other projects in Sweetwater County that were funded with USDA money or loan. They said there were two. One was Sweetwater County Fire District number 1. That was for their new fire station and training facility. And then the second project was Jamestown Rio Vista Water and Sewer District. And that was to connect 200 people to the city of Green River. Sweetwater County actually considered USDA a long time ago, and Wally probably just remembers this. This was for Reliance, but the county did not qualify for a grant at the time because of income levels in the county, and we did not pursue a loan. But anyhow, Sweetwater County could submit a pre-application to USDA, and then they will determine any eligible amount for a direct grant award and or amount of a USDA loan. So regarding the Lagoon Road project budget, to date, there's been $1,211,510 incurred for the project. There's a remaining budget of $20,702,472. Sweetwater County would not be committed to proceeding with a potential USDA grant or loan if it submits the pre-application. It will take at least 30 days or more to evaluate it. In the documents that are in your packet, item 18 estimates an $11 million loan that Jean determined based off of the original request for a loan from the bank, and that was not successful. But actually USDA would be the ones that determine what we are eligible for. And approval of a grant or loan would require compliance with all federal requirements, including bidding, project construction, and audit reporting. So if we did get a loan, it would also be treated like a grant. The current interest rate from USDA is 2.375%. And with that, I would entertain any questions, or perhaps you have more questions for Jean regarding the actual project.
Thank you, Christina. Mr. Legursky, do you have anything to add?
Not unless you guys have any questions.
Now we'll open the floor up now for questions from the commissioners.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Johnson.
First of all, I'd like to compliment staff. It was the staff that came up with this idea. And I think it's a super idea. And I think it doesn't hurt at all to see whether we qualify for it. And as you see, the numbers are for both of the facilities. So as Christina indicated, it could be all or a portion of, depending on what, first of all, what the USDA says we are eligible for. And then second level would be what this commission wants to do with it. So I think, again, with what Jeff has said in the past, it's some good information that we need to have in front of us if it's available, and before we make any decision on that. So I thank the staff for what they've done. That was their thoughts. They dug it up, and it's great.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Other commissioners, comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Shanefield.
As I've voiced before, I think that this project is something that we should not be wasting our staff time on at this point in time. I think that it's something that we're talking about offering incentives for retirement as opposed to layoffs, and we're looking at a $21 million project. Whether we qualify for USDA or not, I think, obviously we would have matching parts of that, and I think a loan at this point in time, whether it's a good interest rate or not, is not a good idea. So that's my opinion. I don't think that we should be spending Christina's time on this at this point in time.
Thank you, Commissioner Shanefield. Any other commissioners?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Commissioner Johnson.
Obviously, I disagreed with her then. I still disagree with her. We don't know whether it's a loan or a grant at this point in time. And as I indicated, I think it's information we need before us before we make any kind of a decision.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Commissioners.
Yeah, I guess I'll speak. I struggle with this project, as we all know. I've been pretty vocal about that. I've been patient in seeing what happens and waiting for numbers, but I'll be honest, I don't know if there's a lot of information that's going to come that changes my mind in moving forward on this project. I know waiting for the financials and seeing what the final bids are would be good information, but I think even if the bid came in at $17-18 million, I don't think I would support this building at this point. And so I concern a little bit about, continuing to spin our wheels on something that that the majority may not support. That concerns me. I do see merit in this project. I see merit in parts of this project. I think the need for the maintenance area is highly needed. I don't know if both buildings are needed, but I also circle back to something I've said before, that I don't know if this is the right time. And I would even question as we go into this, is this the most important project we should, even if we determine that we could do the $18 million, is this the most important project and piece that we should be spending our money on at this point? With Trona projecting down 6 to 8 quarters, the state looking at having to cut another $750 million. And I got to be honest, like I almost choke as I say $750 million. When you make significant cuts and you're only down 750 million more to go, we know this is just round one of what's going to be 2 or 3 or 4 rounds to get there. And that will have residual effect on counties and cities and the people that we live in there. And so I struggle. I see the reason we could look at this, but I just question at the end of the day if it's going to change my direction on this project. So that's, and one of the things is I know Gene's put an immense amount of time in there. I was kind of sitting that I wanted to get to the point where we got the plans and then we could shelve them. That was kind of where I was sitting, because then we'd have them for when it was the right time. But I do concern, this does concern me a little bit. So just to be honest.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. Commissioners, any other comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Smith.
I'll chime in with my previous comments before. I'm looking at this, the information provided to us. We've spent $1.211 million so far to get this information. So I think that it's vitally important to finish this process, this portion of the process. I'm not talking about building buildings yet or making those moves, but I think it's just so important that we have this information so we can make an informed decision. I'm also hesitant. I'm worried. There's a lot going on in the world, and financially, we're not exactly sure where we're going to be or how things are going to be. But I think that we're not doing the right thing if we don't finish this portion of the project, find out the information that we need so that we can move forward with all the information that we do need. So that's my opinion as well.
Thank you. Any other comments, commissioners? Well, I guess it leaves me to, yes, Commissioner Lloyd.
Gene, do you have an estimation on how long it would take us to hear back on this pre-application?
30 days or more is what they said.
Well, we say that again, Gene, I didn't quite hear.
30 days or more.
Okay.
So,
and then remind me too, I know we discussed this about the last meeting, about how long until you think the project is, the drawings are completely done. What was that timeline again, Gene, just to get it all working in my head?
Tomorrow we'll be accepting the SOQs from the contractors. Plans will go out to the approved contractors on August 25th. The bid.
Thank you.
thank you. Any other questions? Well, I guess that leaves it up to me, and I haven't commented on it. I've respected the idea of waiting, getting more information and that type of thing, but I guess when I take a look at and try to keep a barometer on where things are at, I don't think anybody's talking about not doing the project, but I think what I've sensed in this conversation is a possibility that what about a pause at this point in time for a period of time is what I'm sensing. I did not hear anybody say don't do the project, but I am sensing we do have a split on commissions of pausing this project for a period of time until we know better where our finances are in the community. I do know that if we move forward, with waiting for the bids to come in, I think I've heard Gene say in the past, it's approximately about $80,000 to do the bidding process. Am I correct, Gene?
The first bidding process, yes, that is what
Yeah.
the contract says.
Yeah, so I mean, we're near that point to request those bids. Am I correct, Gene?
We're going to start requesting them day after tomorrow.
Day after tomorrow. So it's just a comment to me of do we want to spend that kind of money this time? And if the project is put on pause, do we again spend another $80,000 or more to go out for bid on the project, which in turn, again, people's time needs to be spent again doing this type of thing, whether it's our staff or whether it's somebody else's. $80,000 to me is a position for an employee or support for a agency out there that is experiencing severe cuts that may need some assistance. So where I'm at with it is, I guess it's time to fish or cut bait. And where
Mr.
I'm
Chairman?
at, yes, Commissioner Johnson.
I think we're getting confused to what type of decision we're trying to make on this.
Well, I think there's going to be.
I'm going to, let me
Okay, go ahead.
finish, because let's get the issue on the table. So I'd make a motion to approve and authorize the chairman to sign the USDA Community Facilities Direct Loan and Grant Program pre-application forms for the Sweetwater County Consolidated Facility Lagoon Road Project.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
We have a roll call vote, please.
You've got it.
Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion first?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think, we're not deciding what we're doing with this project. We're just asking, do we want to send out an application to look at pre-approval and more information and a possibility. So even if this fails today, it doesn't mean that we don't go out for bid and we don't continue on with the lagoon project and getting the information that we need, just so that we're clear.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith. Other commissioners? I'd like to comment on Commissioner Smith. You're exactly right with what you're saying. It doesn't precede us at that point in time, but I think we go through this motion, then I'll have a question for the attorney. So with that, we have a motion on the floor. We have a second. Any further discussion? Call for roll call vote. Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Smith.
Yes.
Commissioner Lloyd.
No.
Commissioner Shanefield.
No.
Commissioner Wendling. No. So with that, Commissioner, or John Daly, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Do we
Mr.
need
Chairman.
it? Who asked for Mr. Chairman?
Oh, I just said yes, Mr. Chairman.
All
Go
right,
ahead.
thank you. I sense that there's a desire of the commission to put this project on a pause before it goes out for bid. Do we have to have that on an agenda item, or can it be a addendum under other at this point in time?
I think if there is if there's going to be a specific motion, I think it's valuable to have whatever the specific nature is put on a specific item rather than other, so that there's sufficient notice. And the reason I say that is because there's already been a prior motion to move forward. So if there's going to be a change in direction, it would be good to give notice of the specific change so that notice is out there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that information. So what I was going to propose, we won't do it at this meeting, but I think it would value the commissioners to know that what I sense from commissioners is a sense to put a pause on this project for Lagoon Road. It'll need to come up for a vote, and we'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting. Thank you. Any other questions regarding the application which failed?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a request on the application. I have a request on timeline. As
Yeah.
I said, the bidding documents will be going out to the contractors on August 25th. We're accepting SOQs tomorrow from those qualifications. So we are on track to bid this. Am I correct? Until we find out at the next meeting what is going on.
My understanding, if I'm understanding the attorney correct, that if we were going to put a pause on it so it didn't go out for bid, it would have to have been an agenda item for today. Is that correct, John?
Yeah, I think, yes, you would have to put it on as a specific agenda item. I think that's the best course of action. And then we would take it from there.
All right. So Gene, I guess we still follow the course of action and that type of thing, but the money's going to be spent to do the bids and that type of thing. But I think at next meeting or following meeting, depending on the, there could be a motion and a discussion on pausing the project for up to a period of time. So I guess that's, for lack of better words, that's the way the ball bounces.
No, that's fine. I just wanted clarification of where I am in the process.
No, you're okay. You got to do what you need to do. Well, the rest of it's in the Board of County Commissioners' hands, okay? Christina, any questions?
No, Mr. Chairman, but if there's a future project, just let me know.
We will, and I thank you for your work on this and that type of thing. And we'll certainly be in touch. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Gene. As we move on to our agenda, we have two additional items. The first one up is the tax year 2020 mill levy approval, and joining us is Mr. Davis. Morning, Mr. Davis, our assessor.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. What you have in front of you is our yearly mill levy approval. My office and the county clerk's office work together with all the taxing authorities in the county that require a levy. And we've worked to compile the budgets from all of those authorities and get this document completed. I believe what you have in front of you is the PDF that Sally should have sent out as an email, I think. And then there was one original that was given to her. It's the same thing we do every year. There's no big drama, no controversy. It's just the formal approval from the board that allows me to submit the mill levies to the State Board of Equalization.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Any questions for Mr. Davis? As always, it's done well.
Thank you.
Sir, appreciate it. That type of thing. All right, what's the desire of the commissioners? I'll entertain a motion to approve the 2020 mill levy worksheet as presented.
So moved.
Got a motion by Commissioner Lloyd. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Shanefield. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And with Commissioner Johnson gone, John, is that just absent vote?
He was here with me and he agreed.
Okay, agreed. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
I
All
agree.
right. Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Moving on well, the motion the motion carries. So Dave, thank you very much.
Great. And if I could get a copy, once all the signatures have been accumulated on that, I'll put it in my file for the auditors.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to tab J, which is Gary McLean. Gary, you out there?
Yep.
Thank you. There you are.
Yep.
I'll turn the floor over to you with regard to this position for the fire department.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, County Commissioners. We have in the fire department, there are a number of positions that are approved each year as part of the budget, seasonal positions of various durations. We currently have an individual who is approved as part of a 6-month seasonal position in the fire department. That individual's obtained full-time employment with a local agency. And so Mike is requesting to fill the remainder of that 6-month seasonal position, which is roughly 3 months of that 6-month seasonal position for the department. On July 7th, the county commissioners adopted a resolution to authorize a hiring freeze, and there are some potential exceptions within that hiring freeze. And so once we got through that kind of confusion, we got that request in front of the board, and you should have available to you the request to restaff the vacant position and the potential cost implications for that position.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Questions for the commissioners? Gary, go ahead. Somebody? Gary, this was a seasonal position, of course, so when does supposedly this position be filled for how much longer?
Yeah, so as I said, this is approved for 6 months. The previous person roughly worked 3 months of that 6 months. So there's 3 months of budgeted left in that position as far as the budget. Mike was down on a fire at Clay Basin, and I see that he has logged on, but 3 months roughly.
Thank you. Mike, are you out there?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm here.
Do you have anything to add?
Just say that Gary's correct. 3 months. Some seasonals usually don't work their full 6 months, depending on how fall fire weather is. So just one of the reasons we're able to carry over some of our payroll each year. So when we get to a point where we don't need the remaining seasonals, start scaling back. But obviously, we're not there yet.
No, we're not. Thank you, Mike. Questions for Mike or Gary, commissioners?
Yeah, Mike, Commissioner Lloyd here. I guess a couple questions. Is the person, do you have someone in mind to hire, and by the time they come in, will it really be worth it? Will they be trained? Are they trained at the point where they can just come in and jump in? And what would be the timetable of hiring and bringing this person in? Because if it's only 3 months and it takes time in that process, it might not be worth it.
Commissioner Lloyd, we have an applicant who is currently meets all of our basic qualifications and is currently unemployed and is hireable as soon as he could complete the hiring process. And his training would take about 5 days, and we could put him in the field and make him operational.
I guess, thank you, Mike. And my second question is, how essential is this, since we are on the freeze, to replace this position?
Well, I'll give you an example. It only takes one fire and we lose half our force. So what's happening right now is we're trying to still support structure protection on the fire, Richard Fire down south in Clay Basin, while still trying to staff at least 2 remaining engines here. But our staffing level is now down to 2 and 3 instead of 4 on each apparatus. So it's fairly important because the way we train, the way we drill, the way we operate, we work within that staffing model. So if we don't get the vacancy filled, then, and we have a problem like we did just around the 25th of July, we lost 4 people to COVID quarantine. And that immediately dropped 1 engine out of the cycle. So all it takes is one more person to be sick or something else. We'll be down to staff on 1 engine fully and 1 engine we can't staff. So it's extremely important.
Thank you for the explanation.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. Thanks for the questions. Any other questions for Mike, Fire Warden Bornasian? I would just like to say any position like law enforcement, first responder, such as fire department, that type of thing, public safety is very essential. And with the COVID presently, as Mike pointed out, to lose a staff to quarantine, very limited. Then all of a sudden, so I see it very essential. And I'm glad you brought that up, Commissioner Lloyd, so we can share that. So any other questions, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, at the conclusion of this, I'd like to just ask another question on a similar issue.
Thank you. And yeah, at the conclusion of this, and then are you in a position, you give us a quick update on Clay Basin after we make this decision?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right, commissioners, we have before us a request through HR for this position in the fire department. What's your pleasure?
I'd move to approve, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Smith. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Commissioner Johnson. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Fire Warden Bornasian, what was your question for us?
Mr. Chairman, we also have a PCF program. It's a pay call firefighter volunteer program. They get a stipend of $25 per call, or when they come in for a training or a special event. We have right now 5 PCFs. We budget for up to 10 each year. There's always carryover there. And I would like to know if the hiring freeze would preclude us from bringing on additional PCF volunteers, because I have an application in with HR for also a PCF volunteer with some fire service background that we could also be taking advantage of. So my question is, based on your resolution, would that prohibit us from bringing on PCF volunteers at that rate?
Gary, can you help with that question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, the cost is relatively low. They're only paid a minimal amount per call to go out. Secondly, I think what is implicit in Mike's statement is that volunteerism across the country is declining. And so you typically need a lot more volunteers to get a few people to respond at a particular time. And so obviously Mike has to operate within his budget. So from my standpoint, there's little implication of if the board approves those PCFs. You're not increasing the budget, and these positions are only utilized as needed to be called out when appropriate.
Thank you, Gary. Commissioners, your thoughts? Any reason not to reach out with volunteers?
Yeah, Mike, just Commissioner Lloyd again. Just a question. How many calls does the average volunteer help with in a year?
Well, that's a good question. We only have 5, depending on their work schedule and things like that. Probably a dozen, 12, 15 fires. And then of course, they do come to scheduled trainings to maintain and have certifications and qualifications, just as a seasonal or a fully paid firefighter has. And they do that for that minimal stipend. And it takes a good 60 hours to get wildland certified, and it's well over 100 plus hours to get structurally certified, or another 15 hours CPR AED training. So our line item for PCFs, I believe we spent $4,000 last budget.
Mike, thank you for the answer.
Yes, sir.
Now, does this volunteer, your volunteers maybe come from the other fire departments? Are they more local guys that aren't tied and just volunteers and like to do it on part-time? What is the typical person that volunteers for you? This is just new to me.
Well, there was a time where we did have some other fire department folks, and to help us kind of get things going with this department. They have since ceased that because of demand for their own department coverage. And I would say our typical volunteer is somebody who works shift work and can give us 4 days off in a row. We have a local landowner, businessman that comes in and is relatively available to us in the evenings and weekends, and a couple folks that are work part-time jobs. That sums it up.
Hey, once again,
Thank you. Any other questions, commissioners? Does anybody see a problem with what Mike's requesting? I'm not hearing there's a problem, Mike. So
Okay, I'll work with HR.
yeah, work with HR. Work with HR and see what you can do.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, commissioners, Mike, can you give us an update on Clay Basin Quick Light?
Yeah, approximately 2 o'clock yesterday, we had 2 lightning strikes during a dry thunderstorm that moved through the Clay Basin area. Very little precipitation, and they immediately started a fire on the backside, south side of Richard Mountain there on Clay Basin. At the base of that mountain in the Pigeon Gulch area, rapidly grew. By the time I got on the 191 South at the overlook, you could see the smoke column developing. Got there yesterday. It was really rough, inaccessible terrain. It was about 50 to 100 acres. Started ordering aircraft and resources. It was determined that the area of ownership at the time was BLM and state land, Wyoming state land, public land. So command was transferred over to the BLM. They took the fire, started trying to figure out access into the fire. We inserted some folks via helicopter to get an anchor point established, supported by a helicopter. Winds were forecasted to shift yesterday. We were on our first red flag of the season yesterday, and everything came to alignment. Fire is 150 acres. It ran all the way up to the top of Richard Mountain. Did not come over the north or the west side as it lays, and started paralleling. And then as the wind shifted, it completely blew that fire out to well over 2,000 acres. Made a 2.5 mile run towards the Simplot pump station and housing area. Heavy aircraft came in, started laying retardant line to protect those structures. We inserted some county fire apparatus and personnel well through early morning hours. I just got back this morning myself. Completed a major burnout operation to help protect those structures, at least on one side. Fire made a real hard push towards Utah. Now is in Utah and did cross the Browns Park Road and is established on the south side of the Browns Park Road. Has multiple heads, and containment at this time is minimal. If anything, we've BLM is going to put a type 3 organization together. We have an in-brief this afternoon, and private property is now involved.
Any questions for Mike, commissioners? Comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Shanefield.
Mike, on behalf of Simplot, thank you for all of the efforts to preserve our buildings and to keep our operations safe and our employees safe.
You're welcome. They're a good group of folks down there. I tie in with them each year because they're one of a rare water source down there for us, and they're extremely giving of whatever they can do to support us. So the idea I think right now is to try to keep that fire from coming east across the Clay Basin Road and into Clay Basin and into the gas plant area, protecting private infrastructure, which is pretty populated down in that area, as you're all aware of. And then now it has crossed not only a state line, but a geographical region, geographical boundary in the federal wildland program. So it's going to create a few challenges for management there and coordination. So it's going to be here for a little while.
Thank you, Mike. Any other questions? One comment, Mike, is I appreciate the fact that BLM changed their stance on providing air support since we talked last night. So that was ultimately important. And but anyhow, pass on to everybody. We appreciate what they're doing for not only the industry down there, but for the private citizens and helping protect their property and especially the firefighters on the front line. Very appreciative for their work and everybody's safety is paramount, and make sure you pass that along to them that we appreciate what they're doing and to be safe.
Yes, sir. And Mr. Chairman, this it's a coordinated effort. BLM, state of Wyoming, and of course ourselves threw everything at it we could get our hands on, and it's there's a lot of fires that broke out over the last 24, 48 hours. So resources, the big stuff we need sometimes is limited. But it was nice to see we got what we did. We probably will be entering into a cost share, same as we did with the Laney Rim fire and the Current Creek fire. So we'll be addressing that later.
Well, we appreciate having that information ahead of time, but as usual, because of our great working relationships with the federal agencies and state agencies, they've always been very good about working with us, and that's always appreciated, Mike. So thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Bornasian? Thank you, Mike. Be safe out there. Tell your firefighters to be safe, and thank you. Okay, which brings us to the other part of our agenda for other or for the good of the order. Commissioners? Commissioners? With nothing to add or for other or to add for the next meeting, also executive session. I have nothing for executive session. Was not informed. You okay with that? Anybody, commissioners? With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
We got a motion to adjourn by Commissioner Shanefield. Second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Lloyd. Commissioners' meeting is now adjourned. Thank you. Be safe.